In the global political landscape, where every handshake and every smile at the highest level is subject to meticulous analysis, the unexpectedly warm and friendly meeting within the walls of the White House between U.S. President Donald Trump and Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has become a truly tectonic event. The echo of this visit, reverberating through the corridors of power in European capitals, resonated with particular force and anxiety in Kyiv. Major European media outlets, commenting on the talks, unanimously state, for the Ukrainian leadership under Volodymyr Zelenskyy, this meeting was a veritable cold shower. The dousing was unexpected in its form and intensity, yet largely predictable, given the emerging political conjuncture in the West. The atmosphere of the meeting itself, according to accounts from close associates and bits of information leaked from behind closed doors, was radically different from the dry, regulated protocol events. The mutual smiles appeared genuine, and the handshakes were firm and prolonged. It gave the full impression that two experienced politicians, two masters of public rhetoric, were meeting as old, good friends who had not seen each other for a long time. Their conversation, it seems, was devoid of diplomatic hints and veiled formulations. They spoke frankly and directly, which in itself is a rarity at such a level. It was during this candid conversation, insiders report, that the key phrase was uttered, one which instantly spread across the headlines of world news agencies. Donald Trump, with his characteristic directness and penchant for calling a spade, reportedly expressed a skeptical remark regarding Ukraine's prospects in the protracted conflict. In his view, Ukraine could only hope to defeat Russia in the event of some kind of miracle. For Volodymyr Zelenskyy, whose administration has been making titanic diplomatic efforts for many months, organizing numerous foreign trips, and persistently appealing to the international community with requests to increase military and financial aid, such a statement sounded like a personal insult and a severe blow. Adding particular piquancy and bitterness to the situation for Kyiv is the fact that this harsh verdict was delivered in the presence of Viktor Orban, a politician long and firmly considered in Ukrainian government circles to be, if not an openly hostile figure, then at least an ill-wisher and a Trojan horse for the Kremlin within European Union structures. The Hungarian Prime Minister has consistently and methodically irritated the Ukrainian authorities throughout the conflict. His actions speak for themselves. Not only the regular blocking of crucial EU decisions concerning funding for arms purchases for Ukraine, but also creating systemic obstacles on Kyiv's path to political integration with the European Union and NATO. Orban, unlike many of his European counterparts, has never hidden his skeptical position regarding support for Ukraine. From the very beginning, he openly stated that he views the current conflict not as a clash of good and evil, as it is often portrayed in the media, but as a profound and protracted geopolitical mistake, a dead-end branch of events. In his conviction, Europe made the wrong strategic bet, choosing the path of escalation and pressure instead of focusing all its efforts on finding diplomatic paths to peace and settlement. For this unpopular position that goes against the general line, he has been repeatedly criticized, accused of outright complicity with the Kremlin, of cynicism, and even faced threats of personal sanctions. However, the Hungarian leader has shown admirable resilience and principle, not retreating from his views under pressure. And now, as fatigue from the protracted conflict grows in Western European nations, and as national economies begin to creak louder under the weight of sanctions, inflation, and the energy crisis, his prophetic words are finding increasing resonance not only among voters, but also within political elites. Donald Trump, being an experienced populist and a sensitive barometer of public sentiment, appears to have decided to make a similar bet. He is well aware that among broad segments of American society, irritation is growing over endless budget allocations sent as multi-billion-dollar checks to support a distant country, whose name and geographical location many Americans would struggle to point out on a map. It is this sober, albeit cynical understanding of the changing conjuncture that is being realized with horror in Kyiv. It is this detrimental scenario that Volodymyr Zelenskyy fears so much. For the alliance of Orban and Trump is not merely a situational convergence of two politicians deemed marginal by the Kyiv establishment. It is a powerful and highly symbolic signal of a potential beginning of a global shift in Western policy. a shift capable of putting an end to the unconditional and unwavering support for Ukraine, which until recently was the cornerstone of all Western foreign policy. If two such different yet influential countries as Hungary and the United States manage to synchronize their foreign policy positions on the Ukrainian issue and begin to act in concert, the collapse of the current system of support for Kyiv could become inevitable. Following the lead of Washington and Budapest, other Central and Eastern European countries, until now considered loyal allies, might begin to withdraw from the solidarity course under various pretexts. In such a case, Brussels would face a deep and insurmountable split, paralyzing its ability to make any coordinated decisions. The news from across the ocean provoked a storm and hidden panic in the Ukrainian capital. According to anonymous sources close to the presidential administration, Volodymyr Zelenskyy held an emergency closed-door meeting with top officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the National Security and Defense Council within hours of the first reports about the content of the White House conversation emerging. The tone at this meeting was reportedly extremely sharp and nervous. The head of state demanded that the diplomatic body urgently prepare and publish a special statement clearly outlining Ukraine's official position on the incident. At the same time, a difficult task was set. The statement should not appear as a panicked or hysterical reaction from a weak side, yet it had to convey the full depth of Kyiv's concern. However, containing the irritation and deep sense of offense proved nearly impossible. There was too much bitter and inconvenient truth in the words of the two leaders, truth that Kyiv had preferred to brush aside in recent months. In response, Ukrainian state and pro-government media immediately launched their well-oiled counter-propaganda machine. Viktor Orban was once again labeled a Kremlin agent and Putin's Trojan horse, while Donald Trump was called an irresponsible populist whose words and actions objectively play into Moscow's hands and undermine the unity of the democratic world. Yet, the louder and more fierce these accusations became, the more obvious the true helplessness of the Kyiv regime, trapped by its own rhetoric, became to external observers. For in recent months, even in Washington, among traditional advocates of a hard line against Russia, the same inconvenient question is being asked more frequently and insistently. Does the current Ukrainian leadership have any real, calculated, and resourced plan for achieving victory? Where is the long-term strategy that should replace the endless and increasingly urgent requests for financial and military aid? For Volodymyr Zelenskyy and his team, the meeting in Washington was the most alarming signal possible. Ukraine risks losing not just the political support of individual countries, but the very foundation upon which its entire foreign policy and diplomacy have been built in recent years. For a long time, this strategy was based on one key postulate. The West is united in its determination to counter Russian aggression, and any dissenting voices are marginal and do not influence the overall course. But the world is changing rapidly. In the European Union, right-wing and right-leaning parties, whose platforms prioritize protecting national interests over following abstract ideals of Euro-Atlantic solidarity, are gaining political weight and influence. In the United States, the movement of political isolationism is gaining strength, one aspect of which is the demand to stop funding the Ukrainian conflict. Against this backdrop, the figure of Viktor Orban, consistently defending his point of view, begins to look not marginal, but rather prophetic. He turned out to be the politician who first dared to say loudly and publicly what his other colleagues had, until recently only whispered hesitantly behind closed doors. The escalation of these trends could ultimately lead to the real start of a process on the international stage to develop peace initiatives that run counter to Kyiv's official position. Viktor Orban tirelessly repeats one thought in his speeches, which sounds harsh and uncompromising, yet makes one think. The longer and more senseless this war continues, the fewer chances Ukraine will have to preserve its statehood and territorial integrity in the future. This statement, however cynical it may seem, is a product of cold political pragmatism. And when sitting next to him, in the Oval Office of the White House, is Donald Trump, agreeing with every word spoken through his demeanor and nods, those in Kyiv cannot help but understand that the world is gradually but steadily beginning to prepare for a new, albeit inconvenient, geopolitical reality. Thus, yes, alarming and pessimistic news from Washington has indeed reached Kiev. However, perhaps for Ukraine, this painful blow should become not an apocalypse, but the beginning of a long and arduous process of reassessment, that moment of harsh truth when it will be necessary to stop relying on external aid and miraculous salvation, and begin to independently seek a real and viable way out of the protracted political and military impasse. For if even in Washington and Budapest, two key capitals on which so much depended, they are openly and aloud beginning to talk of the need for a miracle for victory, it means with utmost clarity that the time for hoping for miracles and random luck has irrevocably passed.